Shall we start with a bow? So the main point of this program, as I think Caroline discussed with you already, is we are here to to enter what is called the realm of the inconceivable in Buddhism. This is the practicing lineage. And what it represents is the recognition that while all of us are thinking beings and most likely very sophisticated, very well informed, we've read probably dozens, if not hundreds of books on meditation and spirituality, that as long as we remain in that realm, we're not going to get anywhere. We're just recycling the same old thing over and over and over. Of course, this is the human thing. Humans do this thing, which is constantly mapping reality, making maps. Over and over making maps, and then new maps, updated maps. And as you know, because this is something that is, intimately familiar to all of us, pretty soon the maps supersede the territory. And when we look at a map, we think we're looking at the territory, and many of us begin to live our entire lives in terms of the maps that either we or other people have created. When we live in terms of what we think about reality, of the mapping situation of our left brain, our thinking mind, this amazing part of our brain that we have developed more than any of the other primates, this mapping function. When we begin to invest more and more energy into the mapping function, we create societies that become less and less in contact with the actual world, and we see the modern world is a great example. The extent to which we as a world, we as cultures, and we as individuals lose touch with our lived experience. We lose touch, and we're living in terms of the map. Most spirituality that goes around in the Western world is largely map making, and it is it's not a bad thing, because meditation does open up doors, and the maps become more accurate, and you want accurate maps. Some maps they're just really not accurate. Like the map that says that the personal self is real and solid. That's a map that has no relationship to actual reality, and yet it's widely held to be truth. That's a bad map. A good map is, no, the personal self is actually impermanent. It's an open situation. You're never going to pin it down, and things are never going to be okay. That's a map. That's part of a map. That's a country on the map, and that's a good map. But the thing is, it's still a map. What goes on in, what Buddhism largely has done throughout the ages is to create some very accurate maps of reality. And those maps have been preserved in the monasteries largely, in the texts, in the libraries, in the philosophical traditions. And they have been, they've had a humanizing influence on the world. They've been very good, and many, many people in the West, the existentialists and the phenomenologists and artists and writers of all kinds, philosophers, have been deeply influenced by the maps of Buddhism, and they've come to rethink things in very good ways. I know actually a lot of scientists who have been very influenced and had their minds opened by the maps of Buddhism, but the thing is, they're still maps. The number of people within Buddhist tradition that have been interested in finding out more about the territory is, as Chogyam Trungpa used to say, at least in Tibet, few and far between. Because the territory is a whole different situation. The left brain, thinking mind, rational, logical, linguistic, labeling, linear, like a lot of L's up there. That mind does not know territory, and cannot know territory, doesn't. It only knows its own maps. So if we are happy with the maps, and my guess is that probably you aren't, or you wouldn't really be here, that's fine. But then there's this other thing is, what is the territory of life? What is the territory of experience? What is the naked, raw reality that we live through every day of our lives? What is that? That territory can be known and can be entered by us, thinking beings. It's an initiatory experience. In terms of my own life, I spent decades studying other religions. That's my field, is comparative religion. And both intellectually, historically, and also in terms of meeting people from other traditions. And what I personally found the most deeply motivating and compelling is the initiatory practice, the initiatory journey, the initiatory ordeal. And I thought it was gone from the face of the earth, at least for people like me. And then I met Chogyam Trungpa, and I quickly came to see that the initiatory ordeal was sitting there looking at me, seeing through me, and seeing who I was, and seeing what could happen for me if I was willing. The initiatory ordeal, the initiatory journey, can only be known and can only be entered by the body. In neuroscience, we talk about the left brain, logical, linear, linguistic, labeling, lumpish, thinking mind. And we talk about the right brain, which knows in a completely different way. The right brain now, as Dan Siegel and a lot of other, very good scientists who have popularized neuroscience tell us that actually we shouldn't be talking about the right brain, because the intelligence, the complementary intelligence to our thinking mind, is actually our whole body. It's our right brain, it's our limbic system, aspects of our limbic system, our brain stem, the most important heart as a sort of universal roundhouse of understanding connection, connectivity, the gut. And in fact, all the cells of our body are awake and alive. And that very small part of ourselves that is thinking it's minuscule compared to the kind of knowledge that goes on all the time for us, that we know through our soma, this totality of awareness and experience that we could call the body, we could call the right brain, whatever you like. That knowledge is not accessible to the thinking mind. The thinking mind can process that knowledge, but it doesn't have it. So we have to find a way to enter into in Taoism it's called the dark knowledge. The dark knowledge, and it's dark because you can't think about it. The minute you think about it, you're back in the left brain. When we enter the dark knowledge of the body, we begin to discover the world in a completely different way. We begin to realize that spirituality and human experience are not two things. There is no spirituality apart from human experience. Human experience itself, moment by moment, is a gateway to infinity, it's a gateway to eternity. This is where we find what we've been looking for in our own direct experience. The body knows in a holistic way, meaning it doesn't separate out. It takes things as totalities. Each moment is a mirror, it's a prism in which the entire universe is reflected. This information is known to our body, but not our thinking mind. So when we talk about the practicing lineage, which is Drupgyu in Tibetan, it's this lineage, it's a very different approach from what we have heard about. It is true that in Buddhism in general, in the West and in Asia, the body is mentioned, and sometimes it's used a little bit. But the idea of shifting our fundamental allegiance to the kind of knowledge that arises in our soma is rarely found. We're not talking here about including the body in our meditation practice. We're talking about setting aside, completely setting aside all of the agendas, all of the conscious intentions, all of the techniques, all of the complex meditation practices, setting them aside and doing one thing and one thing only, which is to enter into the dark knowledge of the body and wait. And wait. And wait. And at a certain point, that's all you do, is wait. And you begin to realize that while you're waiting, something is happening. It's like feeling the ground tremble under you, or a sudden eclipse of the sun, and everything goes dark, and there are just filaments of light around the edges of the trees and the mountains. Something that is beyond thought, it's beyond thinking, it's beyond judgment begins to happen. You begin to realize it's happening. And you are not doing it at all in any shape, way, or form. And then we practice some more, and then we wait some more, and then we enter deeper into the dark knowledge. And we begin to discover there's a certain kind of transformation that's occurring in us. In the practice of Buddhism, there are two kinds of transformations that are talked about. One of them is horizontal transformation, You're still living in this world, and your understanding is getting bigger. You go on the internet a lot, you Google stuff, find out about Timbuktu. What is the history of Timbuktu? And why did Timbuktu become this rundown? I actually never been to Timbuktu, so I'm just making this up, okay? So I don't mean any disrespect. But let's just say it's a rundown, rat-infested hole somewhere. Why did this become a symbol of everything that is out there? You can, the amount of knowledge you can accumulate is unbelievable, and we can become very sophisticated, very informed. We can, our view of reality, our map can become so highly tuned that people come and, they love us and they study with us and they want to hear about our map. That's horizontal transformation. Nothing fundamentally changes. We do accumulate more information, more knowledge, more sophistication, but nothing fundamentally changes in us or the world. We still live in basically the same world. But then the other kind of transformation, what happens when you enter the dark knowledge, is what's called vertical transformation. And that is the transformation in your existential state of being. Your existential state of being changes. And what that means is we find ourselves increasingly in a world that we do not know. We find ourselves in a world that we do not recognize and we do not understand. And it's definitely not the world that we knew when we went to sleep last night. It's a different world. And we also begin to discover in ourselves, we begin to discover that we are different in very fundamental ways. And this comes through not meditating in the usual way. In the beginning, this is very anxiety-producing. And I know a lot of you here are very familiar with that, the anxiety of this lineage. It's anxiety-producing. It instills fear and uncertainty, and sometimes terror. And once in a while we walk in this shrine room and we feel like we're in the maw of some gigantic monster that is just chewing on us, chewing us up. Feels like that. I've been there, done that many times in this shrine room. That's the initiatory ordeal. If you read any of the old books in Coptic or ancient Greek, and you read about the mysteries or the initiatory journey that people made, they will talk to you about how the journey of initiation that happens, you feel like you're losing everything. And you're caught between a rock and a hard place, because in the ancient cultures it was understood without the initiation you would never actually be introduced to what's really going on here, and you would never be introduced to who you are. But on the other hand, the journey to do it is truly formidable and truly terrifying. Really, really terrifying. A friend of mine who's been involved in the initiatory process in Africa of his people told me that 50 go out and 45 come back, and 5 don't make it. They die, literally die. In the Tibetan tradition, if you weren't well trained you weren't prepared, and you weren't well mentored, you could lose it. And there are many stories. What I'm getting to is, what we're talking about here is not a small thing. What was offered to me and what is being offered to you, it's not a small thing. Yes, there is an opportunity of not one lifetime, but many lifetimes. When I sat in front of Chogyam Trungpa, I truly wondered, how can this be happening to me? Because at that point I'd spent, 28 years looking everywhere, traveling to India, traveling to Japan, living in places, trying to find an actual living initiatory tradition. And I came up empty-handed. And then I was sitting in front of him, and when you are in that kind of situation, you see both sides of it. On the one hand, it was like, this is what I've always been looking for. And on the other hand, this is my biggest fear, that I'm going to be asked to open to myself in a way, to open to life, to open to the situation in a way that I've spent my whole entire life trying not to open to. And, I'm doing this, right? I'm doing this thing with Caroline and with all of you. But there is no way, given who I was then, this was, in my mind, anybody's mind, as in even the most remote possibility on planet Earth that I would ever be able to do this. I was so gone and so checked out. I was so paranoid. I was like the worst of the worst. Not a bad person, but just like completely messed up. But there was one person who realized that wasn't the end of the story, and that was Chogyam Trungpa. Being with him, it was really hard. It was really terrifying on a daily basis. And being in his lineage and being in his community, it was torture for me. Now, I know there are people running around who don't say that, but I also know a lot of people who do say that, so I wasn't the only one. But what we're talking about here is we're being offered the gift of a depth of life that has been conceived of millennia ago, but that none of us have any idea. We don't have an idea, but we have a felt sense that there's something further in our life, something much, much vaster, much, much more open, much more free. And it's a possibility. If we can stick with it, it's a likely possibility that we can find it. This journey that we're doing here it's not about Chogyam Trungpa, it's not about Tibet, it's not about Buddhism, it's not about me and Caroline or Dharma Ocean, it's about you. I often say this is an adult lineage. Nobody is going to be telling you what to do. We're going to be giving you practices, we're going to be giving you tools so that you can see how much bravery you have about yourself and about your own life and about who you can be. And those tools are yours. That's all we do. We just give you tools, and we give you a way to think about things so that when reality turns up with a face that is terrifying or luscious or enrapturing, you have a place in your mind for it. You don't think something bad is happening. Sometimes I think in this lineage, we talk about the importance of the view and of having an intellectual understanding of what we're doing to give us confidence, about what we're about here. But sometimes I think really when we talk about the view, the single most important thing is helping you, and I hate to use this word, but I'm going to use it, help you normalize your human experience, but normalize it from the viewpoint of upstairs. Do you know what I mean by upstairs? The unseen world, the lineage, whatever you want to say. From their point of view, everything that you're going to run into in your life is part of the journey. And from their point of view, it's so important that we have tremendous amount of confidence in everything that comes up in us, and especially the difficult, painful, terrifying things. So sometimes I think the main job in terms of the teaching is just to help you have confidence in what happens, because when we do this work, we truly are entering into the dark knowledge, into the dark realms, and darkness in the most positive sense. Just in the way that darkness holds all light, the body holds the darkness of the body holds our entire possibility as humans, and all of our human experience going back to the first cell that ever existed on this planet. All of the accumulated experience has been passed down, and it's in the dark knowledge. The dark knowledge is the Buddha nature. The body is the Buddha nature. In Tibetan Buddhism, it's called the Alaya, the universal unconscious. And unlike some of the other Buddhist schools, which we don't need to go into, but some of the Buddhist schools that have been very important for Mahayana Buddhism has said that the Alaya is not enlightened. The body is not enlightened, but in Vajrayana we say the Alaya is enlightened, it's fully enlightened. At this moment our body is fully enlightened. So we can have complete and total trust what comes up, but we have to learn to think in a different way, because we're always trying to, as they say in academia, problematize, which means we're always creating problems out of everything that happens, and we always think that so much of what happens is a big problem, and we have to actually wean ourselves off that erroneous way of thinking. So, very important, but I think that's all we do. We de-problematize our whole approach to reality and our whole experience. And then difficult things come up, definitely. A lot comes up. And I was just at a conference at CIIS in San Francisco with Caroline, and it was a conference on trauma. And I did a number of presentations on the contributions of Vajrayana Buddhism to working with trauma. And there are many people who are working with these teachings, therapists and psychologists and psychiatrists. I find them very useful, and it's good because, this is what happens. We have a way to access trauma that is safe and also extraordinarily profound. And really what we came to is that every person walking the planet has been traumatized many, 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 many times. Whether you seem to be, quote, normal, or you seem to be, quote, incapacitated, it's the same situation for everybody. And most of us cycle through both of those in the course of a lifetime. There are times when we're incapacitated by our trauma, and then there are other times when we can kind of get through it. On the Vajrayana journey that we're doing, and the somatic journey, because really they're inseparable, we are going to be bringing a trust in our traumas, and we are going to be creating a mental space, and more importantly a heart space, for those damaged parts of ourselves to come out of the shadows and to present themselves to us. At present, most of our psychic energy is kept in keeping them down, keeping them in the darkness because they're so painful. As tiny children, the moments of terror, the feeling of being helpless. Babies don't like to be helpless. No creature likes to be helpless. It's an experience that can be very terrifying. Parents have an argument. We're not talking about child abuse. We're talking about normal adult life. It's incredibly shattering for a tiny baby, let alone all of the, problems and all of the assaults and all of the kind of battering that we have been through as humans our whole entire life. There are thousands, 10,000s of parts of ourselves that are down in the darkness, and they are, there's a no admittance sign on our conscious door. Meantime, we're spending most of our energy trying to keep them at bay, and most of what we do all day long, if you look into it, through all of our addictions and our busyness and our habitual patterns, is trying to keep out the painful depths of our own state of being that are constantly knocking at the door, and sometimes they're not knocking, they're pounding. And sometimes they're shouting and hollering, and sometimes they actually break down the door, and then we become incapacitated. Because what comes out, we are completely unprepared for. The level of despair, the level of anger, the level of helplessness and rage and fear, all of it, anxiety. If we are ever to be free, we have to enter into a process of learning how to love what has been kept in the dungeons. We have to learn, and I'm not talking about a sort of romantic kind of love or sort of wishful thinking. I'm talking about actual love. And that is largely what we're going to be exploring here. What does it mean to love, actually? Is it a certain kind of feeling of merging with other people and you feel at one and it feels so wonderful and rosy? Is that love? Is it part of love? Is love so vast that we can't actually long for it? The interesting thing about love is if you have an idea of what love is and you're trying to get it, it's probably not big enough. Because love as it truly exists operates outside of the realm of the thinking mind, of memory, and of wishful thinking, true love. And what we are aiming to do here, Caroline's wearing her wonderful love shirt, so in case I forget what the program is about, I look at her. It's only when she wears that love shirt that I can call her my favorite name, which is Miss Love. As opposed to Sweetheart and some of the other ones. So it's, in some sense, this program, to me, it might be the most interesting and challenging of anything we've done. Because when you get right down to it, somehow love is tied up with what we can't love. What we can't love in each other, what we can't love in the world, and most of all, what we can't love in ourselves. We have to find a way to open to all the parts of ourselves that we don't love. And we have vowed early on, we will never love. I am never going to accept this part of myself. And it's not a conscious statement, it's unconscious. So now, once again, we're back at the gate of the initiatory ordeal. So, I want to just again say, thank you to everybody who has come to participate in this journey. The interesting thing about when you go down into the caves in the Eleusis mysteries is everybody goes, and everybody goes through it. And you probably have some ideas of what is going to happen here, but we don't have any. We have no idea. I mean, we know what we're going to do. But again, in this lineage, practice and direct experience trumps anything that anybody thinks. It makes it very exciting, it makes it very interesting, and it makes it slightly terrifying in a good way.